Welcome to the Relationship Toolbox, a show about the skills we need to build healthy relationships with others. The last time we were together, we were talking about how to have conversations with folks who had different perspectives than we do, and we were framing them as difficult conversations. And we talked about how we felt that it was sometimes dangerous to enter into difficult conversations because of the pitfalls of our reputations and our relationships and our feelings and our identities. And also we talked about the fact that there was a great cost if we didn't engage in those conversations because we lose a sense of connection. Sometimes we lose that like self-respect because we've capitulated to something just by our silence. We also talked about how to prepare and how to ready ourselves, how to know whether we were ready for a difficult conversation. In that, could we regulate our emotions? Were we open to learning? Were we moving from like a persuasive, argumentative stance to a learning stance? If we were searching for connection, and if we could listen and be curious. So we're going to presume that we have done those things in that inventory and that we are ready to embark on a difficult conversation with someone.
So today's show is going to be about those specific skills that we need when we are talking with someone with opposing views to ours. And we want to indicate that there'll be many skills that we will review. And it's not realistic, I think, for our viewers to think, oh, let me write all those down, I'm going to do all of them. So what we would recommend is that you find one or two of these skills that you think might help you in the situation that you might be in, and try to work with that skill, master it, and then when you have completed that, take on another one. So don't try to take on all of these that we're going to be sharing today.
Well,
it's a lot.
It's a lot, it's hard, it's messy, and we, even in preparing for today, we acknowledge that this is hard stuff. We don't always have our conflict resolution hats on with, and we show up as like a brother or a sister or a next door neighbor, and we are tempted to fall into these same pitfalls of old patterns. So we get it, it's difficult, but it's learnable, and it's about having the right disposition and practicing. So we're going to practice today.
And we are still learning too.
We are still learning, and sometimes it's hard to sustain. So first thing is that you need to invite somebody into the conversation. So you're going to say, I'm interested in hearing more about your thoughts on whatever it is that you're finding is difficult. I suspect that our views are different, and I would like to hear more about your thinking. Would you be willing to talk to me about this situation? So you've explicitly invited them to be part of that. So then you may also want to state why, and it's, I would like to understand more about your perspective, even if we don't agree. I want to understand. And personally, that has always been something that has driven me. I want to understand, and I want to be understood. And even if there is a difference between where I stand in relationship to somebody else, I still can feel at peace if I feel understood and I understand. You could say our friendship, our colleagueship means a lot to me. It could be a member of your family. Our family means a lot to me. I'm willing to learn, and I would so appreciate you sharing how you've arrived at your point of view. And then you want to set guidelines. And this seems so awkward and artificial to set guidelines for a conversation, but it really are the guardrails that will protect the process. And it's the process that you're plugging into can really convey the success. So you're going to ask, would you be willing to listen to me with the same attention and openness that I am willing to listen to you? And hopefully you get an agreement there. And then you could also offer, we can stop. Can we agree that we could stop at any time if we feel uncomfortable or if this becomes unproductive? And we could, set aside a different time, and you could agree on that. Those are reasonable expectations. And then, can we agree to keep our conversation civil and refrain from sarcasm and name calling and insults? Because again, that's not going to be productive. And hopefully you can get buy-in and then start to tiptoe into it.
So now, assuming that we have done a nice invitation to this.
And the other person has said, sure,
Yeah,
I'm game.
We've kind of made clear for ourselves and for the other party what our intent is in having this conversation and what the guidelines are. Now we actually need to get into the conversation itself. And as you just mentioned, Marsha, it's so important that no matter what we debate or discuss, if we feel heard, that is kind of the magic of helping people to tolerate differences and to bond when they have similarities.
And to be creative sometimes about solutions even.
Yes, because they feel heard, they feel safe to discuss it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about focused listening. And the words, I think, say what we mean. It is focused. And we want to emphasize, too, that it takes energy to do that. It is not something we just can do easily. So how do I know when I am doing focused listening? There are some indicators, and if we're paying attention, we'll probably know whether we are or not. The first one is, can I accurately summarize what the speaker is telling me? If I can do that, there's a good chance I'm focusing in on what is being said and paying attention to that. Another criteria is, can I suspend my judgment? We have such a tendency to, when we hear something, to immediately get into, oh, that's okay, or that's not right, or we shouldn't be thinking that, or that's not what I think. And that destroys the ability, as we've talked about, to listen, because we're getting caught up in the business of our own brain, our own experiences. And we need to therefore avoid saying or thinking that if we hear something from the speaker and we say, oh, I had that experience too, and away we go in our mind, we're losing track again of what we should be listening to. The other thing is to listen for feelings. It's not just about words. It's also about the feelings that the speaker is sharing in subtle ways. So how do we find out what they're feeling? Aside from we can ask them at times, we observe body language. It's one of the things that will tell us a great deal. What is the facial expression? Are the eyes scowling? Are they looking open? Is the tone of voice one that's very intense? Is the eye contact there? What are the hand gestures? So we can, part of this focused listening is paying attention to those things. And if my mind tends to wander, which it does, I mean, I don't know what the statistics are for the average person to concentrate on something, but it's pretty short, I think. So if I unfortunately start to wander in my thinking, okay, bring it back. And if you feel, ooh, I wonder what I missed in that, I really was out of it for a minute there, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, my mind wandered for a moment there. Can you repeat that last part? I want to hear that again. As long as you're not doing that over and over again, because if you had a pattern of conversing, oh, sorry, my mind was wandering. What was that again? That would send a totally different message.
I actually went to a conference not too long ago where they talked about something called tracking. And it was a kind of listening that they asked you to, in your head, not out loud, to repeat what you heard the person saying. And if you do that, it takes so much effort that you're not involved in the judgment and the distractions or that reminds me of.
It suspends that for you.
And I've said this before, but listening is such a huge part of communication. And we put so much preference and emphasis on the production of information and
The words
not
and the
enough
ideas,
on
yeah.
the reception of, the taking it in and the digestion and the consideration of what is coming at you. And we really need to make the fact that we have been listening visible. And we're going to talk about how to do that, because that's the component that gives the person the understanding that you have heard them.
So these are the things that we can begin to gauge ourselves by, at least as some indicator.
Right.
And the last one is to keep in mind as I'm trying to listen to all this, remember my intent. Was my intent to get more information? Was my intent to share with this person that no matter what you think, your relationship with me is most important, so I want you to feel free and safe to say these things to me? Is it curiosity? I really would like to know how you came to that conclusion. What experiences in your life? What have you read? What have you seen that contribute to this point of view?
And if your intentions are not falling into that, you're really not ready, because you're probably just trying to persuade
or convince,
demean, criticize, and you're going to fall into old patterns. So we are going to roll up our sleeves and jump and rumble right into some
really get into it.
into some topics that are potentially disruptive and just difficult. And this could happen in your family. It could be about anything. It could be parent, child, partner, neighbor, coworker. But we are gonna, for the purposes of, this is summer of 2025, we are gonna just rumble with some hot topics. And for the purposes of demonstrating these role plays, we'll be offering some opinionated statements that could be very triggering. But we're hoping that they're also authentic examples of the kind of stuff that is happening out there right now. They don't represent our opinions or
Right.
perspectives, but we are offering them as examples of difficult conversations. So we're going to try to do it as balanced as possible. So one triggering remark that we could play with here would be
As if you were the
as if
speaker.
I'm the speaker now.
Okay.
I'm not being meta anymore. I'm speaking to you. And my comment could be, isn't it awful how our state pays to house these homeless drug addicts in motels?
Okay.
That's a triggering statement, or can be. If you concur, then you're just going to ratify each other. But it could be a difficult conversation, because if you're going down the regular path, the other person could say, oh, I think it's remarkable that the state supports homeless, especially in the winters, by subsidizing lodging
So it could be
motels.
either way. It could be a triggering
Either way
statement.
is a triggering statement if that is not your view. And if you just grab onto that, then you are going down the path of, I'm going to just be louder, stronger, and try to convince you. We're going to try to offer a different approach.
Okay, we're
So
going to actually go through these steps
I
now.
will repeat the first triggering statement and say, isn't it awful how our state pays to house these homeless drug addicts in shelters?
Okay, so the first thing I need to do as someone who's suddenly been confronted with that statement that I do not agree with in this role play, the first step we talked about is, can I paraphrase, we're going to use that word, can I paraphrase what you are saying?
Can you show me that you heard?
Yeah, so that you know I'm heard. Now there's two purposes in paraphrasing. And one is just to let you know I'm hearing you, I'm getting the content of what you're saying, so that you know that, you feel heard that way. But there's another equally, if not more important, purpose for paraphrasing, and that is to encourage the speaker to continue to share their ideas, their thinking. I want to do that because that's what helps them hear themselves, and it helps me to understand, oh, that's where you're coming from. So the paraphrasing has to take both of those roles on. So the first thing is that paraphrasing, of course, it could be somewhat repeating what you said. So you feel that it's really awful that the state is supporting this. And that would be one way. But I could actually make it even shorter because I want to keep the flow going. I want to keep you talking about this. I want to learn more. And the more I talk, the more I cut that back.
Right, because then I become the listener.
Right.
And it's about you. We need to focus on one side at first.
So being real succinct, I could just say something like, awful. I'm just saying one word. And bingo, you pick right up on it. Yes, awful. And then away you go again with it. So that's what we think is the best thing to do if you can. But again, that's personal style and the person you're working with. So it is important to be as succinct as possible.
But you wouldn't necessarily want to convey agreement by just saying awful as well. So you really have to make that decision.
And there's where that subtle tone of voice comes in. Awful
If
would
you
be
didn't agree,
one meaning, but awful. And so that's an important point.
But you're trying to make your listening visible.
Yes.
Okay.
So the other thing is to use the same vocabulary as the person is, not in a parroting way, but to use the word. For example, if I said, oh, what you're saying is that it's just criminal the way these homeless people are being housed in these motels. You didn't use the word criminal. I have now introduced a new concept. And again, you're sitting there thinking, maybe you agree with that new interpretation, maybe you don't. But now you're in a role of assessing whether you agree with what I said. So we don't want to do that. We want to keep the vocabulary as close to what the speaker has given us as possible. The other thing is don't add statements, which I guess is similar to terminology, but if you said, oh yeah, and when you see them going into the motels, you think, oh my gosh, here we go again. What's the matter with our governor? And what is happening to people? And they're just druggies. Well, I didn't say all those things. As the speaker did not say all those things. I'm adding more to it. And that's what I do not want to do.
So again, it's becoming about you, and you're not giving me proof.
Well, I'm interrupting the flow of the person. I want the person to almost exhaust themselves with sharing it, not in a debate way, but just
to say everything that I
need to say.
And then we could go on to some of the other strategies. So how would you? Let's say that the other comment was first, like, well, how remarkable it is that the state takes care of people, especially in winter, who are homeless. So let's paraphrase in that way, if that's the first triggering
I could do
statement.
the same technique. You feel it's remarkable, and just leave it there, and let you say yes, and because I've indicated I hear you. So the same steps are there, no matter which way the opinion is created. So in the final thing is basically the point we're trying to make is don't put the speaker into the listener role by saying too much in terms of trying to paraphrase them. Keep it simple, keep it succinct. And finally, check for accuracy. You may, we've experienced this a lot in working with people
don't hear.
That they go on and on and on, and after a while you say, I can't even remember all this. So you may, as the listener, have to say, could we stop just for a minute here? I want to make sure I'm capturing all the points you want me to hear. So could you mind let me sort of paraphrase what I'm hearing so far, make sure I've got it.
In chunks, just like sometimes like when there's a translator, they can only do certain amounts of a narrative. Also, we have experienced that if you have a different perspective, sometimes you can't actually capture it all because it is so dissonant for you to hear that you don't capture it, and you'll need to check in with the person that what you heard is accurate and complete. And you give them space to say, no, you missed that, or that's not what I meant.
Right, that's a wonderful part of it because it does two things there. One is if it's not correct, you're not getting the message that they want, then they can correct it and say, no, this is what I meant. The other thing is they're hearing their own words coming back at them, And so they might say, oh, wait a minute, I guess I didn't mean quite that way. So it allows them to sort of reinterpret what they're saying.
What they're saying. And we don't always pick the best word in the moment to speak about something, unless we've rehearsed it.
Right.
Or
after we've heard it, we may say, wait a minute, I guess that isn't what I really think. Right. So it gives the opportunity in a somewhat safe environment. The listener now is respecting that flexibility. And if the speaker comes back and says, no, I guess that isn't really what I'm thinking, it gives the opportunity for them to correct it, make some adjustments to it without being interrogated.
Right.
So another way we can begin to show that we're creating a safe space for someone to share their views is through the art of the question. This is one that I personally find most helpful. So basically, we're using questions to try to probe the mystery of how did they get to where they are now. But we have to be careful with questions because they can also come across as an interrogation. And if we keep interrupting the speaker with questions, they're going to see that as a frustration. Where it takes them off track. Again, one of our purposes is to keep that flow going, that they can keep sharing with us. So we can ask questions with a basis of curiosity, meaning, what's the mystery behind this? I really want to know. How did you come to view it that way? That's the most ideal type of questioning. Avoid questions that start with, well, why?
Why? Because that presumes that you disagree and it's judgy.
It puts someone on the defensive.
It's almost like, why did you
guaranteed,
do that?
Yeah. So why do you do that? You say
Tell me more about that, or how did you?
Right. So you want to avoid why in most cases. So and the next thing is you want to, in your response, to invite more speech, more talking, more thinking. And you can do that through, as you mentioned, can you tell me more about that? What else can you share with me about your point of view? I never thought of it that way. Keep going.
If that's honest.
So you don't want to, but again, that goes back to your intent. If your intent is really to find out, then that's genuine. I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that further? Which isn't, how did you come up with that? It is really inviting.
Or you're an idiot, or you're stupid, or you're whatever. You're literally saying, how?
Right.
What
You're
made you think that?
inviting them to tell you more about it. And finally, you really want to see the situation. If you say, I really want to see this through your eyes. Our relationship is that important to me. That's a real positive message for them to give the speaker. So that once again, you can say, even if we come out of this conversation still disagreeing, we're still friends. We still can be together, and it's not going to ruin that. Finally, we have to make sure that when we're using a questioning format, that we ask open-ended questions rather than closed. For example, a closed question would be, well, when you see these people going into the motel, do you feel angry? Well, that is a closed question because the answer to it is yes, I do, or no, I don't. However, if you say, when you see these homeless people going into the motel, what do you feel? Now you've asked an open question and allowed them to explore for themselves. What is it that they're feeling? And then you can respond to that.
And I would say if you've gotten this far and you've been able to sustain some curious listening and paraphrasing and teasing out for more information on life experiences, you should congratulate yourself because this is hard work. And it's really hard to sustain your ability to listen and be curious when you're hearing things that you disagree with.
And it does take, you say, a commitment, not just a discipline, but you need to be committed to, no matter where this goes, I'm committed to my intent when I first started this.
And it's messy.
It is messy, yeah.
Generally speaking, it's complicated,
it's not
sticky,
predictable.
and the issue itself is typically not doesn't live in the extremes. It lives somewhere in the middle, and we need to find that place together instead
like
of
you
just
said,
camping out on the edges.
It is messy. It's not predictable because you never know how someone is going to take something. You never know whether you have understood it correctly. And there's always that possibility that there'll be offense taken or put someone on the defensive. That part is messy. However, what we're making the point here is that if we have skills, we can begin to counter those tendencies, and our chances for carrying on a difficult conversation increase exponentially.
And so far to this point, we are kind of controlling the process because as listeners, we are honoring the agreements. We are listening carefully and with respect and with curiosity and offering something back. As we progress, it is more of a dance, and we have to be more careful about the rules. And we may not actually have time to get through all of that today.
Well, I think up to this point, we haven't really made any demands of the other party of the speaker.
Yeah.
And that tendency has to shift in the conversation at some point, which I think is what you're getting into now with it.
Because we want to take turns at this, right? And so we need to kind of flip the script, and we've modeled to the other person how we hopefully, with sincere authenticity of desire to understand and curiosity and to get all the information and to clarify it. And then we kind of assert that it's our turn.
Yes.
And that can be where it can get even more difficult because this is all new territory, and we're engaging with folks in a new way. And I think, Tom, we're going to have to
I think we ought to save that for the next show, yes.
Although we were prepared to continue.
So I think that that's a good point that we could, let's say that next time when we come to you, we will continue with these skills.
Which can be applied to any position.
We'll start with the skill of being assertive. What does it mean to be assertive? And how do you carry that out? I think that's difficult for many of us in certain situations. So why don't we plan on doing that next time? And in the meantime, we look forward to seeing you next time then, when we'll continue with some of the skills necessary to keep healthy relationships with others.